Fear of the Dark.
Once you have children, your life changes forever. Your child brought new kind of love and joy into your life, and you couldn't imagine life without them. Children are the most amazing blessings from God, but unfortunately, I can say that there are some parents out there that don't deserve having children. While bringing a newborn baby home from the hospital is often a jubilant moment filled with love and excitement, but however, this wasn't the case for baby Brianna entering her new home. She became the victim to unimaginable abuse. Brianna Maria Lopez, a healthy baby girl, was born on February 14, 2002. She moved into a home with her mother, Stephanie Lopez, father, Andy Walters, and uncle, Stephen Lopez, in La Cruces, New Mexico. Immediately, all three adults began abusing the newborn baby. Stephanie would bite Brianna, punch her if she cried, and slap her for the same reason. Andy and his brother, Stephen, inflicted most of the abuse to Brianna as Stephanie sat back and watched. The pair kicked, punched, threw, pinched, and even assaulted the infant when she was weeks old. They thought it was funny when Brianna cried in agony after the abuse and hurt her even more. They stuffed clothing in her mouth to muffle the sounds. On the evening of July 18th, 2002, Andy went out to purchase beer, and when he came home, they all proceeded to get drunk. Stephanie claimed to have had only a few beers before heading to bed in the same room that they all were in. The two men decided to play a demented game of toss Brianna into the air, throwing her with enough force she hit the ceiling and then fell to the ground. Brianna screamed in agony, yet the mother claims to never have heard a thing going on around her. Around 7:15 a.m. on July 19th, 2002, Stephanie awoke to the sounds of Brianna crying and noticed she had fresh bruises on her and asked the others what happened. They told her they were a little too rough when playing with her the previous night. Stephanie did not see anything wrong with that explanation and carried on about her day, ignoring Brianna's injuries. Later that day, Andy, her father, volunteered to change diapers and assaulted Brianna with his finger during the time. That was nothing new. He regularly assaulted the little girl with various foreign objects. When Stephanie noticed Brianna near death, she ignored it and decided to wait several hours before calling an ambulance. When she did find the time to call them, she lied and told them her daughter had fallen from her high chair. Apparently, she was delusional enough to think authorities would buy that story. Brianna was rushed to the hospital where she was pronounced dead at 11:10 a.m. She was just 5 months and 5 days old. Brianna passed away as her body gave in to the abuse. Doctors were horrified by what they saw when Brianna arrived at the hospital. She was literally covered head to toe in bruises. She suffered fresh and old injuries, including bleeding, brain hemorrhaging, broken bones, broken ribs, both legs broken, both arms broken, lacerations to her fingers, her genitals, and many others. Brianna survived this horrific abuse for 153 days before her life came to a tragic end at the hands of those that should have loved her the most. Her story is a scary demonstration of how terrifyingly evil people can be. Stephanie Lopez was convicted of negligent child abuse after failing to do anything to help her child. The New Mexico Corrections Department said that she could be released as early as September 28, 2016. That's less than 15 years for her daughter's torture and death. As for Andy Walters and Stephen Lopez, they remain in prison. Walters might not serve his entire 63-year sentence as he's eligible for good time. May Stephanie, Andy, and Stephen feel pain and misery for the rest of their natural-born lives as they continue to undeservingly exist in this world. As for Brianna, may you rest in God's arms as an angel where you belong.
Sentence. Brianna, who was just 5.5 months old when she was raped and murdered in 2002, became the catalyst for change in New Mexico child abuse laws. Her mother, who was convicted of negligent child abuse resulting in death for doing nothing to stop the abuse, and for child abuse for biting her child, was allowed to earn good time and only serve 50% of her sentence because her crimes were not considered serious violent offenses at the time.
Misunderstandings are so powerful that they can break the most beautiful bond in just seconds. Most lovers' quarrels end with an open heart and apology. But for Catherine Knight, a 44-year-old mother of 4, had totally different visions, which were murder and mutilation being the end result. On February 29, 2000, Price arrived home to find Catherine, although not there herself, had sent the children away for a sleepover at a friend's house. He then spent the evening with his neighbors before returning home and going to bed at 11 p.m. Earlier that day, Knight had bought some new black lingerie and had videotaped all her children while making comments which have since been interpreted as a crude will. She later arrived at Price's house while he was asleep and sat watching television for a few minutes before having a shower. She then woke John Price, 45-year-old boyfriend, for having sex at her home in Aberdeen, New South Wales, Australia. Shortly after the couple had sex, Price fell asleep. Moments later, Knight stabbed him repeatedly in the chest approximately 37 times. Despite suffering from multiple injuries, Price managed to escape from the bedroom, leaving a bloody trail behind him as he made his way to the front door. Price was unable to flee the house, and he ultimately died from the wounds Knight had inflicted with a butcher's knife. Knight had years of experience as an abattoir, working in Australian slaughterhouses. She used the same instruments on Price as she did on the animals. She used the knife to remove the skin from his body and hung it from a meat hook she previously installed in her living room. She peeled Price's body with such expertise and precision that she was able to leave his skin intact, including Price's nose, ears, genitals, mouth, and his hair. Knight's actions shocked Australia, and many drew comparisons between her and some of the most prolific cannibal killers. After decapitating the body, Knight placed Price's head in a pot on her stove and cooked it with a variety of vegetables. She also roasted cut pieces of flesh in the oven. Then Knight placed the dish, which she served with vegetables, baked potatoes, and gravy, on the dining room table. Reportedly, she wrote cards with messages for Price's adult children, which she sat next to each meal. The authorities later found an additional portion of Price cooked buttocks in the backyard, which led investigators to suspect Knight may have engaged in cannibalism before tossing the remains outside for her dog to eat. Just prior to that day of killing her boyfriend, Knight stabbed Price in the chest, an assault that had caused him to kick his girlfriend out of the home they shared in Aberdeen. Reportedly, Knight had a documented history of domestic violence. Fearing she would harm him again, Price went to the magistrate's court on the morning before his murder and got a restraining order to keep Knight away from him and his children. Later that day, Price told his co-workers he was afraid of his girlfriend, even stating that if he didn't come in to work the next day, it would probably be because Knight had killed him. And when Price didn't show up to work that morning, on March 1st, 2000, his supervisor sent someone to his home he shared with Knight to check on his well-being. Price's co-worker immediately noticed blood on the house front door, so he contacted the law enforcement. When officers arrived at the Alberdine home, they forced the door open. They discovered the gruesome scene of the crime, in which they also found Knight in a coma-like state after taking pills in an effort to end her own life. The authorities rushed Knight to the hospital for medical treatment, and she eventually recovered. When investigators asked Knight why she killed her boyfriend, she initially claimed that she had no recollection of the events that took place that night before. Knight claims she's been subjected to repeated violence and sexual assaults. She was one of 8 children. She also said her brothers had sexually assaulted her as well. She also alleged her parents routinely beat her and her siblings with a dog leash and an electrical cord. According to Knight, her father, who worked at the slaughterhouse, frequently hit her mother, leaving her with black eyes. And she's been into multiple toxic relationships as well, that even led her to commit attempted murder. And these were the reasons why she committed this extremely terrifying act that led her to commit the murder that she did with Price. 2 psychiatrists examined Knight and diagnosed her with both PTSD and BPD, borderline personality disorder. BPD is a serious mental disorder that can cause the victims to have unstable behavior and moods, and people with this disorder are prone to impulsivity and often experience intense anger and depression. Mental health professionals deemed her sane and fit to stand trial. Shortly before a trial was scheduled to begin in October 2001, Knight pled guilty. She was escorted to prison that day, and the judge ordered that her papers be marked never to be released. For the first time in history, a woman in Australia was given a life sentence without parole.
She dressed in lingerie she'd brought that day before waking Price and having sex. When Pricey fell asleep again, Knight attacked. Viciously, ferociously, like the butcher she was, stabbing him at least 37 times. Then, a few hours later, the final act of revenge.
She coldly and calculatedly skinned this man very, very carefully. In fact, it was so precise that upon autopsy they were able to re-put the skin back onto his body in a really grotesque way, but it actually...
Cannibalism has been well documented around the world in a lot of cases and has existed throughout the long arc of human history. None of us could actually grasp the concept on how gruesome and inhumane this kind of practice is. No matter how hungry you are, you would be very unlikely to sit down and eat another person's flesh. This story is very strange, which makes the case so unique than others. The case of Armin Meiwes might be one of the most bizarre crimes in history. Armin Meiwes was born on December 1st, 1961, as a former computer repair technician. His father abandoned Armin when he was just 8 years old, leaving him to be raised by his mother. Armin later described his childhood as very lonesome after his family had fallen apart. At a young age, Meiwes' cannibalistic desires began to develop. He fantasized about killing and eating his friends so they could never leave him. In 2000, Meiwes advertised online for a willing victim to be slaughtered and eaten on a fetish website called Cannibal Cafe. As stated, "I am looking for a young and well-built male aged 18 to 30 to be slaughtered and consumed." Surprisingly, Meiwes received a lot of replies to his request. But then Meiwes received a response from a 43-year-old Jurgen Brandis, an engineer that caught his attention. Brandis was a bisexual male who was in a steady relationship with his long-term girlfriend. However, he had a secret desire to be killed and eaten. What a strange desire to have, right? Many of us are afraid to be killed, yet alone die. especially while being consumed. In particular, he had an obsession with sexual mutilation. And yet, Brandis believed Myris could be the person to help him achieve his ultimate goal. They discussed the best way for Brandis to be consumed and the subsequent disposal of his body. After a month of exchanging messages, Brandis traveled to Myris' home in March 9th of 2001 in a small town of Westfield, west of Rothenburg, Germany, where he offered himself to Myris as a willing victim. First they made love, then Myris showed Brandis his slaughter room, then fed his willing victim sleeping pills, alcohol, and a bottle of cough medicine that made him drowsy. Myris then set up a video camera to film the entire event. Myris attempted to cut off Brandis' penis with his teeth. It bled violently, and he wasn't able to bite it off entirely. So, it made him decide to finish it off with a kitchen knife. Brandis remained conscious despite the excessive blood loss. Myris put him in a bathtub, and as he was dying, he made a strange request. He asked Myris if they can eat his own dismembered genitals together. However, the raw meat was too thick for the weakened Brandis to chew. Therefore, Myris cooked it with garlic and pepper. For the next 10 hours of Brandis dying slowly, Myris finally put an end to his suffering and stabbed Brandis in his neck several times. Once Brandon was dead, Myris' cannibalistic fantasies became a reality. Arwen Myris claimed, "I took out my best dinner service and fried a piece of steak from his back, made princess potatoes and sprouts. After I finished preparing my meal, I ate it. The first bite, of course, was very strange. It was a feeling I couldn't really describe. I spent over 40 years longing for it, dreaming about it, and now I was getting the feeling that I was actually achieving this perfect inner peace or connection through his flesh. The flesh tastes like pork, but stronger." The cannibal dismembered and ate the corpse over the following 10 months, storing body parts in his freezer under pizza boxes. Police arrested Arwen Myris in December 2002, a year after Brandis' death. His crime came to light when a college student alerted authorities to new advertisements for victims online, implying that Arwen planned to kill again. Investigators searched his home and found the frozen body parts and the videotape of the killing. Arwen was subsequently diagnosed with schizoid personality, but deemed fit to stand trial. In January 2004, Myris was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 8 years and 6 months in prison. In a retrial in May 2006, he was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. Because of his acts, Myris is known in Germany as the Rothenburg Cannibal.
He kept Branda's body in his deep freeze and routinely would go back to cook more and more pieces of his body.
And Myris actually ate around 20 kilos of Brandes' flesh.
Myris is being held in this prison. He describes eating his victim as like taking Holy Communion. I've seen reporters have to leave the court to be physically sick.
Good evening, everyone. This is Yuri K, and this is the end of the video. Please leave a comment and let us know your opinions on the matter. If you happen to like this content, please check out our other videos. Make sure you like and share amongst your friends and family to help our community grow. You happen to be new to this channel? Please make sure you subscribe. It's free and you can always change it in the future. You have some terrifying story suggestions? If so, make sure that you send it to my email, fearofthedarkstories@gmail.com, and I'll feature it in a future segment. But you guys stay safe out there. And remember to always be afraid of the dark.